I got into English probably around 2010, I want to say. At that time, I was into uh, a lot of language things. Like that was when I first discovered Esperanto, for example. And I think all of these interests of mine sort of revolve around the problem of language to a degree. It seems like with English, for example, people are trying to solve some kind of a linguistic problem. At the end of the day, it's like the idea is partially like all these foreign words have made English a lot more complicated.
Right.
And in a similar way, I think I got into the idea of Esperanto because it was solving a similar problem. It's like language is complicated. Can't we make it like easier, more simple, more direct? You know, approaching things from the English side is though is like approaching it from the native perspective, right? As opposed to let's just step outside of English and approach and solve it from the outside, right?
Right.
So yeah, I was into English for a while. I think I was on the subreddit back then, which was like a totally different kind of experience than it is now.
Well, it seems like you've been aware of it a lot longer than I have. I think I first heard of it. I think it was Lang Focus's video on YouTube that I first became aware of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because I think it has gone through a sort of renaissance because of a couple of, popular videos that just blew up, you know. I might be a little bit older, I'm not sure, which probably affects it as well, but it is definitely interesting because I think I originally came to English because of spelling questions about English. Like when you look into how to solve English spelling, you naturally sort of have this thought, well, wouldn't it be easier if we just got rid of the foreign words that confuse the spelling so much, right?
Yeah, or just had a set of consistent rules that you always followed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, then my linguistic interest kind of waned for a while, and then kind of were rebooted 4 years ago or something like that. So I'm kind of coming back to it and seeing a lot of people in the English world. That's it's really cool to see.
Well, this is a bit of a tangent, but how much do you know about Esperanto? Did you ever learn it?
Yeah, I actually used to be a moderator on the Esperanto subreddit in like 2010 or 2011.
Okay.
And that was when there just wasn't, again, this like on Reddit at that time, you would get like a top post on the whole website and it would be like 150 comments. And I remember thinking like, oh, if it has more than 100 comments, there's no point in commenting because it'll just get buried, you know? Now the top post on Reddit has like 10,000 comments, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, I knew Esperanto, and that was probably my foreign language, so to speak, that I knew the best, and that was like my first experience learning a foreign language.
So how does Esperanto work? Is it like an average of European languages?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because the Esperanto project has been sort of like co-opted by like a lot of different belief systems, but originally it was really seen as a European thing. And the idea was that we're going to make international communication easiest because by just reducing European languages into one thing. And at that time, people were like, well, oh, naturally, European words are the ones that are the most widespread across the world. So, we'll just use those as the basis because they're the most well known. It's like a way to bootstrap international communication. I think perspectives on that have changed, which is why you have newer projects of like international auxiliary languages where they try to incorporate more non-European words. It's just different ways of going about the same question, really.
Well, what other ones are there? I think I'm only familiar with Esperanto.
Well, you kind of want to think about it in terms of categories, where you have what you could call a world lang. In
Okay.
that community, you'd call it a world lang, which would be like lingua de planeta, globasa, some of these languages that tend to take words from everywhere and mix them all together. And then there's languages that you could call like a zone lang, like a zonal auxiliary language, and that could be like a Germanic aux lang, or auxiliary language, a Germanic one or a Romance one, and it just takes words and grammatical concepts within one family, linguistic family.
Right.
So to a degree, you could say Esperanto is a zonal language from the European sphere. I'm actually also involved with the Occidental language, which is a European zonal language as well. It's just less artificial than Esperanto. And yeah, I actually can pull up a homepage for that. This is a site I made a long time ago, but yeah, Esperanto is kind of a growing community, and it's interesting to talk about this because the Occidental language, because this is actually quite related to English as well, because part of the idea behind Occidental, or really any auxiliary language, is that like if there can be a better international language, then that would theoretically free English from the shackles of being that, because, for example, English is sort of required to use all of these quote unquote international words because it is an international language. But if you could offload that job of being an international language to a different language, that would free English up to be more like a real like autonomous home language.
It seems like that would be very difficult to do considering the momentum that modern English already has for being the international language.
Absolutely, but that is a problem for English at the end of the day too, though, because it's like, how are you going to promote words like English words that just are not known internationally? It's a serious uphill battle. But what for a language like Occidental or anything similar to it, what they would typically do is just use English words and concepts as a way to bootstrap. So like the grammar of Occidental is very Englishy, and a lot of the vocabulary is the international vocabulary of English, if that makes sense.
So what makes it not English? What's special about it?
Just the fact that it is more internally consistent, you could say. I'm trying to find a quote here. The best way to think of Occidental is as a tidied up common Western European. It's the French or the Spanish you wish you had learned in school because it keeps the common vocabulary but removes the parts that make them difficult. So yeah, this is definitely worth looking into because I think it's almost like the other side of the coin to English. Like I kind of see it as one of the keys to like unlocking the English world.
So does it keep does it keep any Germanic vocabulary, or is it mostly just Romance words?
There is Germanic vocabulary, but what it would do is it would keep, for example, the way that you form words, like word derivation and grammar, it would keep that consistent, but you can use it on Germanic words. Let me find an example here. So, for example, the word I think, or maybe a better one is okay. So like the word for drink, right, or the verb for drink, it's a Germanic word, right? But you can still then consistently apply these different derivations onto it in the same way that you would apply a Romance word like pensar, right? So it follows the same internal consistency, which gives it a sort of autonomous feel where you're like, no matter what the root is, whether it's Germanic or Romance or Slavic, you can know how to change that word consistently.
Right. Having consistent rules would just make it a lot easier to learn.
Yeah. So yeah, I could go on about this for a while, but this is actually relevant to runes as well, the Rune School project.
Well, yeah. Speaking of runes, you were talking about other writing systems. You mentioned the Shavian alphabet. I don't really know anything about Shavian.
Yeah. So this is also super relevant. Like it's all you can all kind of see it all like rotating around the same like fundamental interest, right, of the linguistic problem, so to speak. So you have projects like Occidental and English that sort of approach it from a grammatical, vocabulary perspective, where you're like, okay, maybe if we change the grammar, it can be easier and more logical. Maybe if we change the vocabulary, it can be more internally consistent. The other side of this is changing the writing system. For example, English spelling is really difficult. right? But it doesn't necessarily need to be.
Who first came up with Shavian?
George Bernard Shaw, actually, the playwright.
Was he doing it because of spelling inconsistencies?
He actually was doing it because of it's like multiple reasons, but he was primarily concerned with economic concerns like efficiency. The story behind Shavian is actually super interesting, and I recommend everyone like watch these videos, the creation of the Shavian alphabet on this Shavian info page. The videos are really, really well done. His concern was particularly efficiency, economy. He had a real heart for the poor and the uneducated, and he really just wanted to help increase literacy rates. So he wanted to design a writing system that had zero concern with etymology, and he wanted it to just be purely economical.
So when you say economical, you mean like in the amount of information it contains, in a given string of characters?
He wanted it to be economical in the sense that for one phoneme, and we can talk about what a phoneme is later, for one phoneme, one letter. So part of that is then like if I pronounce price like price, right? If somebody else pronounces price like Preuss, there's a difference of sound, right? You'd say that's a difference of phonetic realization, but at the end of the day, it's the same phoneme, okay? So no matter how you pronounce the word price, that I sound, it would still be the same letter.
Right.
So number one, it helps with knowing how to spell because you can consistently know any word that uses this I sound is going to use that same letter. But also any phonetic realization or any accent difference is going to use the same letter as well. So it's a way to unite a bunch of different accent varieties, as well as just be efficient in the mind sound connection.
So if you had different pronunciations of the same word, it would still end up being spelled the same.
Yes. Yeah, that's the idea behind it. Yeah. So with the Rune project, I kind of differed from that a little bit, and I can talk about how or why. But that's the idea with Shavian because George Bernard Shaw was also living in England a long time ago. Like, if have you ever heard of the play Pygmalion?
No.
It's the premise of the play is that a rich guy takes in a sort of street urchin woman and I don't know, like an Aladdin character, like it's, whatever, chimney sweep type woman. And he teaches her how to live in proper society. And part of that is how to speak properly. And it's meant to be, a commentary on society and on what it means to be proper or improper, these things. But part of his passion was that like everybody deserves to be able to speak properly, right? Because that woman didn't do anything wrong other than just being born into a certain area, right? That taught her how to speak in a certain way. Part of it is uniting accents in that way. If you've seen the movie Pretty Woman, I think Pretty Woman is based on Pygmalion. Like it's a modern adaptation of that.
Well, besides runic and Shavian, are there any other writing systems that you know of?
Yeah, so after Shavian, the designer of Shavian went on to do a couple projects actually, not just QuickScript, but the next immediate project was QuickScript, and Kingsley Reed is the name of the guy that designed it. But he developed QuickScript based on a couple of bits of learnings that he got from Shavian, because Shavian didn't immediately take off, so he thought, well, oh, okay, I guess something is wrong with Shavian. So he made QuickScript because he thought that some of the things wrong with Shavian was that it wasn't easy enough to write. So he made it a little bit more similar to shorthand writing, where the words can, let's see, the words can connect. So junior QuickScript and then senior QuickScript is more connected and flowing, So that's the idea behind QuickScript primarily, but he also changed the phonemes a little bit. So in Shavian, for example, you have two different phonemes for, I'm trying to find them on this page, two different phonemes for ado and up. So this is called a schwa and this is called a strut. Like a schwa is like in the A in the word comma, the A on the end of the word comma, and then up is like the U and up. But in QuickScript, he united those to just be the same. So he had a do for both of them, a do for schwa and strut both. So he made a few different decisions there, but it was very much similar, other than being easier to write and then changing the phonemes a little bit. But QuickScript didn't really take off either because for a number of reasons. But like it's like if he wanted to have a shorthand writing system, there was already shorthand writing systems out there that were very efficient at being shorthand. So it was kind of like it was like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of situation. And then you also have the Deseret alphabet, which was designed by the Mormons in America. Now, this is also a sort of phonemic alphabet, but it's not super phonemic. Like it's a little bit more modeled exactly on the way that Mormons spoke in America, like at a certain time. And there's certain like evidences that show that, but you could make it into a phonemic script similar to Shavian. But one of the things that I dislike about Deseret is that none of the designs of the letters have anything to do with each other. Like, for example, you have ill, right? ILL. This is the letter for ill. Can I zoom in? You have
That's
ill,
better.
and then you have eel, and they don't, the two sounds are similar. They're related sounds, but they don't look anything alike. And that's sort of the issue that I have with it. Some people like Deseret for different reasons. One of the unique features of Deseret is that it does not have a schwa letter. They added a schwa letter later on, which means that every word was basically spelled as if it was over pronounced. So instead of water, you would say water. And I guess the idea is that you're just pronouncing things as if you're like over enunciating them, and then you can just reduce them in speech, which that's valid for a couple reasons, but it's not exactly solving the problem of speech to the degree that I would like.
Well, when it comes to runes, there's several runic alphabets. The older Germanic languages didn't use runes the same way as each other. So, what do you do about that in your system?
Yeah. So to kind of tell the story of how I arrived here, so I have been using Shavian for a while. I can read it and write it right now, and I even made a Shavian School website. So if anyone is interested in Shavian, which I think is probably the better system compared to QuickScript and Deseret, and the Shavian community is quite large. It's great. I would recommend it any day of the week, and you can go to Shavian School and go through the lessons. It's very similar to my Rune School project. But from Shavian, I came across some issues that I had qualms with about Shavian. Let me look at the whole alphabet. So, for example, there's debates about these letters, song, the NG kind of sound, and then who, the H sound. Some people think that these two letters should be reversed. There's questions about the in letter versus the eve letter and when to use each one. There's questions about reversing the look of, let me find here, reversing the look of arrow versus early in terms of the letter design. So when I was working on Shavian, I these issues sort of bothered me, and I realized at the end of the day, you know, you're not going to, the decisions made in the design of Shavian are at the end of the day arbitrary because they're just from the mind of one person, right?
Right.
It went through some kind of a committee, but he like ultimately early looks like this and arrow looks like that just because that's the way it is, and it's like, okay, cool. But if he just invented it out of thin air, why can't we just change it out of thin air? So then I got thinking, well, what if there was a script that was like Shavian, but the letters weren't arbitrary, And then I started looking into runes because the English language used to use runes. So that's the whole premise behind it. Runes have a long history that, as you mentioned, began in other Germanic languages. You have the Elder Futhark, the Younger Futhark, and then you have Anglo-Saxon runes, which would be the Futhorch or Futhorch or however you want to pronounce it. So what I used for Rune School was specifically the Anglo-Saxon runes as they were used in England.
Well, their usage wasn't consistent, was it? Like they would use them in different ways, different times.
Yeah, yeah, and there's actually a really good, obviously you're in the English community, so you know about the creator Hurleblot on.
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, he's got some good videos.
I highly recommend his videos on runes, especially. For example, there's one video that goes into the history of Anglo-Saxon runes, and it talks about the evolution of the runes. The biggest thing about using Anglo-Saxon runes for modern English is trying to figure out a consistent system for assigning sounds to runes. So I'll jump into the Rune School website because I have a blog about this called The Runes and Their Sounds. So changes are always going to have to be made in terms of going from the old sound assignments, like the Elder Futhark or the Old English assignments, to a modern English. And in this post, I go through and I highlight what the sound changes are, and it's like kind of red, orange, green. Orange is like it was changed a little bit. Red is like okay, it was changed a significant amount. Green is like no, it's pretty much the same thing. I break down here like how I went about changing the red ones basically, and my logic for doing so. So part of the idea with Rune School is that I wanted to basically just write out all of my thoughts on it. I don't want to be dogmatic and like assign things just like from my position of authority. I want to present my ideas and be like, does this make sense to you? Yes or no? And
Right.
if it doesn't, let's talk about it and kind of because I want it to be like a community sort of thing. But yeah, so I went about assigning the sounds based on a various logic of doing so. Yeah, and I shall say that most of these sound assignments are pretty well agreed upon. Like for example, everything in this Old English IPA column is just like basic info that you would get from Wikipedia. Same thing with the Elder Futhark assignments, basic info from Wikipedia. Like I'm not doing anything like, oh, I'm gonna find like the esoteric info of like I have the real knowledge. I wanted to just go with the common knowledge.
Well, where are the big disagreements in usage?
Big disagreements would be probably this one, this AL letter, because it had at different periods of time it had the sound and the E sound, like E. So like I think it was originally like E, and then later it went to these sounds. Again, Hurleblot has a good video on that. I'm trying to think of what else would have the disagreements within the Anglo-Saxon runic world here. I think everything else is fairly agreed upon. I mean, of course, it's going to be hard to tell, but definitively on some things. But I think it's pretty well known in terms of the research. I'm not like an academic. I don't study runes. I feel like it would be a waste of my time to like try to study runes better than the academics already have. So I'm just kind of going off of what the consensus seems to be and then making logical choices based upon that. So I walk through the sound assignments and then I kind of break down like, we need this to be phonemic. We can't just have this be phonetic, right? Like if you assign each rune to like for example, like I don't know, this like this rune, I had this assigned to the strut sound, the sound. And if I assign it just to this very specific well, there's a wide range of sounds that people make for that lexical set, that
Right.
sound. So what I did was I'm explaining it in terms of phonemes, where it's like for this sound right here that I'm kind of circling, your pronunciation of that specific sound could be anywhere within this circle. That's kind of the idea there. So what we're talking about is like conceptually, these are the ranges of sounds. So that kind of brings me to the next topic of lexical sets. So in order to talk about that, I want to talk about the work of Jeff Lindsay. So he's on YouTube. I highly recommend his channel for everyone interested in English pronunciation. He has a video specifically about the vowel system that he uses, or he used for redoing the vowels, making it more simple. And you basically have these phonetic or phonemic groupings, right? So within this red box, you have these 6 phonemes, and then within the yellow, you have these 6 phonemes, and then these 7 phonemes. But they're sort of connected, right? So you have this I, you have this I, and then you have this E. So similarly, I adapted that chart into something like you see below. So each of these words represents a phoneme. Okay, so you have kit, near, fleece, dress, square, face. The idea is that square and face are adaptations, they're adaptations of this initial dress sound, this eh. And then similarly, near and fleece are adaptations on the kit sound. I could go through the rest, but you kind of get the idea where like this Lex check, this red column is the main vowel. And then you have the next sets that apply changes on top of it. So like you have foot, and then you have cure, and then you have goose. And they're like goose and cure are related back to foot. And then similar with lot, thought, choice. Lot and thought, for example, are like lot is a hot topic because Americans don't really pronounce lot at all. But for the sake of the chart, this is the concept behind it. So in the lessons of Rune School, what I do is I use these words to guide you through what the pronunciations of the runes are. Based on my sound assignments that I came up with, you'll see in the first lesson, for example, that this rune is the sound in kit, right? So then I teach like, okay, what does that say? Lip. What does it say? Pill. You know. Um, so using this, it's a lot more helpful than saying like giving you like an IPA symbol for like what the sound is. And then I can go to let's see, that's another one, 5. Um, the rune for the vowel in cat is this. Now, in different accents, they might pronounce that sound in a slightly different way, but yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's kind of the gist of like how I assigned the sounds, and I encourage everyone to like check out these blogs and like come join my Discord and like discuss, questions or feedback on it. But I wanted to be as uncontroversial as possible, basically. The system the system is originally designed from Rune Revival. Uh, so I came across Rune Revival, and we became sort of online friends in like fall 2022. And Rune School originally taught the exact Rune Revival system. Just based on my own feedback and some feedback that I got, I then branched off from the Rune Revival system. So I consider them to be like a brother system, so to speak. What you'll see on Rune School is basically like Rune Revival with some large ideas like switched around. But once you learn this runic system, for example, you'll be able to understand this one like super easy. And I would say that's true of like any most runic systems. For example, though, there are some that will use runes in a pretty like loose manner. Like Stella's runic system that I also really like. The difference with this system is that it doesn't use just the Anglo-Saxon runes. It mixes runes from the Elder Futhark, from the Younger Futhark. It mixes them all together. So it's a cool system, but I just don't find it to be very true to the original Anglo-Saxon Futhark, which is what I'm interested in.
If somebody wants to learn how to use runes, can they find all of the information on the Rune School website?
Yeah, you can find all the information on this website. Rune School is a system for using runes. It's not the system because, as I said before, Old English is very different from modern English, right? But what I've done is based on my learnings from Shavian, from Rune Revival, from different areas, I've made an extremely usable system that is very intuitive because I've also used concepts from Jeff Lindsay, Lexical Sets for Actors book that I highly, highly recommend for people. This is a lot more information about lexical sets and how they differ across accents. It's basically like a runic system that will genuinely genuinely make you appreciate your own language more. Because I wanted a system that would be so, it would feel like so intuitively Englishy. One of the benefits of this system as well is that it is flexible. Here, you can see where I have some points comparing it to Shavian. Letter design of the runes is historically rooted, obviously. So there isn't going to be debates about like, well, why does this rune look like this? You know, for example. Well, it looks like that because it's looked like that for thousands of years, right? Flexibility to seamlessly add or subtract phonemes as the user wishes. This is a big one. If you use Shavian, you have to use all of the phonemes as they were designed. If you, for example, if you're using Shavian and you don't have this lot sound, which would be all, because Americans just say ah instead. If you don't have this sound, this phoneme, you're not ever going to use this letter. So that's one whole letter you're just never going to use. So it just makes, like with Shavian, you're almost required to speak like in a certain way, which I didn't really, it oftentimes feels rigid to people. Transparently shows the relationships between phonemes with consistent use of combinatorial patterns. So you can see this here in this chart, for example. I'll open this up so people can look. So remember that chart that I showed? This chart, if you actually want to see how the runes are applied in the same colors, you can see how I did that here with the red column, the yellow column, and the blue column. So
Yeah.
we still have kit, dress, trap, lot, foot, and then it's just expanded out to be more detailed. This is like the master sheet, basically. You might not have this marry sound, and you might not have merry. You might have everything be square, right? Mary, like Mary, 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 basically. And that's okay, because the idea is that with the design of the runes, the way that the system is designed is that common mergers of lexical sets are designed to look similar, and lexical sets that are not commonly merged are meant to look more different. So a good example of this would be strut and palm. Native English speakers pretty much never confuse palm with strut. But objectively speaking, on like the IPA chart, for example, those two sounds are actually quite similar. By having them be two different runes altogether, this one in the parentheses is the one that you would typically use. I have a more, here, let me go back. Sorry, I'm jumping around so much. I have a more simplified chart right here, actually. So palm is right here, and then strut is right here. So a foreign learner of English, this system would actually help them quite a lot, because they would see visually that strut is very distinct from the palm sound, even if they think they sound similar, because the letters are so different. But comparatively, they might see that palm and lot look very similar. Palm is basically lot with this little bit broken off.
Yeah, if you're reading fast, you might mistake it for the other one.
Exactly, if you're just scanning the page, and that's by design. That's one of the greatest aspects of the runic alphabet, is that it looks similar. Another example is foot and strut. There's a lot of accents that will confuse, or not confuse, but that will merge strut into foot. This font doesn't show it super well, but the letter for foot is actually meant to be the same exact shape as this one down here. The only difference is that it has a little line in the middle. So if you're scanning the page and somebody writes the word B-U-T with this letter, this foot letter, you know, if you're just scanning the page, you're like, oh, it looks, you know, okay, I obviously see that he's trying to write but, you know. So yeah, like that kind of thing is really, really nice.
Now, are those the only two letters that have similarity in the visuals and the sounds?
I would say that, so looking at the, let's go back to the IPA chart, and I have an FAQ page as well with a whole section about what about my accent, where you can go through and find, like, okay, yods and yod coalescence, near and square, Mary, Mary, Mary. It has a bunch of information on this stuff that, you know, you can find that in the FAQ. But going back to the chart that I had, where is it? Here. Okay, so these three sounds with the two lines coming out, so this is ash, ak, and os. You can see that there's a huge amount of overlap with these three, right?
Right.
And that's by design. Like, the rune masters that designed this, however many centuries ago, were very, very smart, because the Elder Futhark only had this one on the left, but English had all, like, It had sounds over here, it had sounds in the middle, it had sounds over there. And this was before the IPA chart, as you see it here, even existed. So they intuitively knew that there's a spectrum of sound here between o, right? There's a spectrum there, and they should all be kind of related because they kind of blend a bit.
Right.
And then you can also see here, like with this letter up here, this rune was originally something more like over here with this Y sound, more like an E. But the logic of placing it here is that the rune is basically a blend of U with E, and it's kind of an U sound. So it would be appropriate to apply it for any number of like U-ish sounds. And then I went through different English accents, and I determined here. Let me actually pull up that part where I go through that. Okay, choices made. Foot. So for this rune, I go through and I explain like this rune most likely had an U sound. It's hard to find a modern day correlate to the sound, but let's look at the data. Sounds similar to U, and then dialects using it for the foot sound, dialects using it for the goose sound, and I walk you through the logic of it. Again, I want to make decisions with this system where, everybody's kind of on board with the logic behind the sound assignments. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So if anybody has questions about it, they need to go to your Discord.
Definitely join the Discord. If you go to the About page, there's links here. The
Okay,
tools, and if anybody wants to write runes, and this is how I actually found Rune Revival originally, which, by the way, Rune Revival has a great system. We just differ on a couple concerns, basically, but I recommend everybody subscribe to his YouTube channel, and you can find that link right here. But he made a keyboard for typing runes. If you get the Keyman app, you can install his keyboard, and then you can start typing runes as well. But if you go to our Discord, for example, there's a number of us that are writing in runes, and you can just get some reading practice, basically.
Okay, awesome.